From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and what is west of Westeros and their shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk, and I'm Ken Knapsack, getting back up on the dragon, getting back up on the horse. Took an unplanned. Are they ever planned hiatuses when you run a podcast? Sometimes you're just like, I can't do it anymore. I got to take a break, and we are in the middle of the rewatch. We are still getting ready to really ramp up our season 4 rewatch. But last time out, we had some news we want to talk about Dunkin' Egg, and it was a kind of a last-minute show, and I brought my friend Alden Diaz on, and we had some fun talking. And then, I took a little break. But now, New Year, we're back. We got people in chat like our friend Victor Bracamontes. We got Ranger Donald. We love having y'all check in. Crafted Jedi's here. We love having Jedi, all the faiths represented here today. So we are going to have a quick show, get the podcast kicked off for the new year. We got some news we're playing kind of catch up on. And yeah, I can't do that alone. And so I did what I did last time. Very last minute. It was like, hey, Alden Diaz, boom. Do you want to come on and talk some Game of Thrones news with me?
And I came from across the narrow sea in a barrel. I came the other way.
You get this way. I got you in the middle.
Completely drunk and was throwing up. And I said, yeah, I'll do it.
Are we? I think you and I are somewhere in the summer isles just having a good time.
Oh, you would hope. I mean, especially with the way things are now, like exile is the way.
Exile is the way.
Like, that's what you want.
Will McLean here as well. Says, just remember House of the Dragon comes out this year. Yes, Heath Jones is here. Hello, Heath. What up? What up? And then Victor has this great comment. Alden, I think you would appreciate this one. Hey, Ken and all, stuck in a meeting, but excited to listen to this instead. That, Victor, is how you do it.
I love that it's not listen to it later. Listen to it instead.
Instead, I have never attended a meeting that I didn't want to get out of during the meeting. So I really respect that there. Alden, how you doing? We always talk Star Wars. You've, of course, got the Octo Radio Star Wars podcast, among a lot of the things you do in the broadcasting business. But did you have any Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Song of Ice and Fire Christmas experiences?
Not experiences directly, although part of this will tie into a story with Peter Dinklage and Cyrano, his adaptation of Cyrano that's coming out. So that's why we're going to talk about him later on in the episode, because he's been doing press. But I always watch like Graham Norton and stuff. So like those holiday episodes are always fun, and seeing him on and things like that. So it's just been a lot of catching up on all my Oscar movies and things like that. So having Peter in there and having Emilia Clarke, at least in likeness in comic book form.
Right.
So those people are always relevant in your life.
Game of Thrones will not leave us. Song of Ice and Fire will not leave us. And that's why we're here talking about it. And like Will McLean said, we are in the year of House of the Dragon. Alden, that's kind of crazy. I almost haven't to wrap my head around the fact that there actually will be a new Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, World of Ice and Fire, whatever you want to say, that GOT universe show. We're going to have one in 2022. You and I already have so much Star Wars to talk about. We're going to have some Game of Thrones to talk about.
I know. I mean, we're going to hit the point, and we briefly touched on this last time I was on. We will hit a point in the next calendar year from now where I'm going to have to say, ooh, that Game of Thrones is going to have to wait because I have to catch up on my Lord of the Rings. Oh, I have to catch up on my Star Wars. I have to catch up on my Marvel. I never thought that we'd get here. So
that is insane. And I always go back, I'm so happy that a young person like you, with all your hopes still in front of you, is alive and kicking in during this time where it's never easy to be a nerd about some of this stuff. I get that, but where I could never have imagined this growing up in the 80s. Like I had a lot of toys and TV shows, but I was told to leave it behind. I was told that is something of your youth, and now here it is everywhere you look. That's a great time. That's a great thing.
Yeah. I never thought that some of the conversations I would be having with other people in my life. Like my mom watched all of Game of Thrones. Couldn't tell you the name of a single character, but she had a great time. She had a great time in the same way she did with Dexter or anything like that. She just thought it's crazy. It's so exciting. And
love it. I've been watching Dexter New Blood too. That's a different podcast, different show. So having a lot of fun there. Ranger Dunn has a question that we're not I don't think we can answer quite yet, but after our second news story, we might have some clues. Reggie Donald says, do you think it'll be the first half or second half of the year for House of the Dragon? I think we're looking at second half. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be second half. If for any other reason than Game of Thrones being gone sort of created a vacuum in the top of the year that I think we're seeing filled by
Yeah.
2021, WandaVision, Falcon, Loki, Obi-Wan is probably spring, all signs, we don't really know. But I think that fall is sort of like this period where it's like we haven't quite hit Oscar movies and other things.
Yeah.
So it's like you can get in there. Like I can't think of a premium show that starts then. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. And, Game of Thrones itself had generally had that springtime kind of lockdown. I always remember having to hope that the first episode of Game of Thrones wasn't on the same night as WrestleMania for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was a big problem. Yeah. I wonder how it's gonna I wonder if they're gonna take Sunday again, but with streaming. My mom is watching and just like that, a Sex and the City story.
Oh,
With
yes.
they literally did a Star Wars story branding, but for Sex and the City. And that's coming out on Thursdays, as we know. Marvel and Star Wars have staked out Wednesdays, so they could kind of do whatever they want now.
Yeah. Hey, look, don't forget, in 2015, a lot of the conversation was how could they possibly dream of putting a Star Wars movie in December? And that is now kind of what we almost view as tradition for Star Wars movies outside of Solo. Ranger Donald has a follow-up here. I would just like to know so I can buy a bigger TV beforehand. That's not a bad tactic.
Bigger TV, correct color settings.
Yeah.
Miguel will come for you.
That's right. That's right. Miguel Sapochnik will come for you. Maybe we should all tweet him and be like, could you and your DPs let us know what we need for our TVs?
Please. What are the settings? And honestly, it's funny that you bring that up because the other day I was watching who shared it. It might have been Hector Navarro, who we know, Nerdist and Hyper Heroes. And there was Tom Cruise for like the Mission Impossible movies, him and Christopher McQuarrie.
Yeah.
They did a little PSA about the settings, the best settings that everything should be on. I think that they should do that for House of the Dragon. Take off that motion smoothing.
Yeah.
Get in there with the right colors because Miguel is more involved with this show than he was even with Thrones.
Yeah, and look, I'm not even saying this to needle him. Let's just do this. Let's get ahead of any kind of argument. Because I've always said, in looking at the Long Night episode, I just dumb effing luck had my TV. I don't change any of the settings. I know all the terms you're saying. I know them. I couldn't find them. That's where maybe my age generation gap problem comes in. And I just had dumb effing luck, had the right settings. The battle looked clear, saw everything I needed to see, and was confused. But I did see some other footage and other people that I know. It was a legit problem. I totally get it.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're going to be headed with TV talk. So make sure that you are ready.
Make sure that you are ready. Well, before we look ahead, let's look in the past here. Now, Alden, you and I, we understand the broadcasting game. We have to, try to remain fair and balanced. Those are words that I've heard are important. I don't know if they're always adhered to, but they're words that are out there. There's no secret. I think all of us watching are fans of Peter Dinklage, fans of Peter Dinklage as Tyrion Lannister. Yeah, he did a pretty good job with the role. Would you say, Alden? I think he did pretty good.
I would say that out of all of the characters, he was definitely one of them. No, he was great. I mean, he was incredible. He's for me at least, because I didn't know about the books before the show started.
Right.
I think that Dinklage as Tyrion was the one where people were talking about it casually in my life. Like I would be in high school and I would hear people say like, oh, and then there's this Tyrion guy, and he's like the sarcastic one. Like you would hear about him sort of thrown out first before you would hear anything else.
I agree with that. You go back to season 1, but not just season 1. Go back to season 1 in 2011. 7 episodes or so before, 9 before, Ned becomes the talking point at the water cooler in a big time moment. I think, John and Dany definitely there, but there was this thing of Tyrion almost being the point of view character for us, despite being a Lannister, despite coming from that money, despite being clearly flawed. He was the one kind of giving us the truth on the lay of the land.
And
John and us.
And then on the real life level, it was a massive, massive, what is the word? A watershed moment, like a phrase,
Yeah.
a watershed moment for representation.
Mhm.
For Peter, who had said that he wasn't going to do fantasy dwarves anymore. He wasn't
Yeah.
going to be the butt of the joke like he is an elf.
Right.
Probably the only thing in Elf that really hasn't aged well is that scene with
Right.
him. And for him to get that part, in a just world where we didn't judge people by their
Mm.
size or skin color or anything like that, Dinklage has the swagger to play space cowboys. He has the
Yeah.
swagger to play heroes and stuff. And finally, that was able to come in such a complex part.
Absolutely, which leads us to what he's been saying lately. Now, I have cited in this show a lot to the point where I'm sure it's sickening to people. His comment that I paraphrase. I should probably just get it tattooed so I remember. But just this comment he had said about 2.5 years ago after the controversial, and I absolutely acknowledge it was a controversial final season of Game of Thrones. Of his idea of just like, we were telling a story. There was great purpose behind it. And maybe at the end of the day, in that very Dinklage way, you shouldn't have got a tattoo of the Dragon Lady after 3 or 4 seasons. You should have waited to see what we were doing. I cheered very loudly on that day, and I still cheer for that quote. But it seems though, Alden, and I want to get your thoughts on just that quote. And again, I'm paraphrasing the quote, but also it seems, I don't know. I just always understood and really appreciated his point of view on it.
I think it's an important point of view in real life, and it's an important point of view in fiction. Obviously, we both go to Star Wars. I think it's a
Mhm.
lesson that people just learn. Like being a kid my age, looking up to Anakin Skywalker, and then seeing Revenge and being like, oh,
Oh,
so that.
hey.
So there's that element,
Yeah.
and then on a real life level, we've all idolized somebody that ended up being not great
Mhm.
and celebrity capacities and stuff. And so you have to approach from both of those angles, both with a show that maybe a show won't turn out the way you want it to. You have to live with that, and with characters. And I think that it's a balanced take. But again, said with Peter's sarcasm. There's a reason why he was good for that role. It's because
Yeah.
he's sharp and he's sarcastic.
He's got a little that East Coast edge that I love, and just kind of says it, and maybe they come off as barbs sometimes. And I'm here for having all the discussions. Again, I fully aware that not everything worked in season 8 for everyone, and not everything may have worked in season 8. And I get that, and we're having fun on this rewatch, going back and finding what's in the story, connecting to those themes beyond that, what the show was communicating early on. And I believe season 3 is so key to that, so key to what they were doing, setting John and Danny's goals, setting Danny up for failure. And a lot of the story for me is the way the world treated Danny and Cersei and a lot of those characters. But we'll have the discussion more there. Alden, I'm going to pull some of his quotes because he, while promoting Cyrano, because this always happens, an actor goes out to promote something, and of course, if you're in a big franchise like Game of Thrones, Marvel, Star Wars, or you're an old director, you're going to get questions about those properties, or do you want to direct them?
Yeah, of course.
That's the way it works. So speaking here, I'm just going to pull some of these out here. Here's what I'm going to do, Alden. I'm going to read these 3 big quotes, okay? Part of this larger interview. And then we'll dive in, okay? Then I'll kick it. He said, I'm trying to give some context, but like I just literally copied and pasted them, and I've just been reading them. Says they talk about the season 8 reaction and the fan base. They wanted the pretty white people to ride off into the sunset together. He starts there. He says, by the way, it's fiction. There's dragons in it. Move on. Adding after a laugh. He's laughing. No, but the show subverts what you think, and that's what I love about it. Yeah, it was called Game of Thrones, but at the end, the whole dialogue when people would approach him in the street was, who's going to be on the throne? I don't know why that was their takeaway, because the show really was more than that. Put a pin in that. I do want to talk about that one in a second. Then he says, one of my favorite moments is when the dragon burned the throne, because it just sort of killed that whole conversation, which is really irreverent and kind of brilliant on behalf of the show's creators. Shut up. It's not about that. He said they constantly did that, where you thought one thing, they delivered another. Everybody had their own stories going on while watching the show, but nobody's was as good as what the show delivered, I think. He does leave a little room for opinion there. Then I'm going to dump all that onto your desk here, like we're having a meeting. I've dumped it all on your desk. Sift through what you want to start with.
I love this on so many different levels. The first level, on the Peter level, just the way he is.
Yeah.
For people that don't know, Dinklage used to be the frontman for a punk band. Like, he's got a background in sort of a stick it to the man attitude.
Yeah.
And he's had to have that, being in a game where he was looked at so differently. So it always cracks me up, especially now that he's past it, that he's also standing by the work, standing by his friends, because there's definitely the people that did their job, did it well, and moved on.
Yep.
But then there are people that are, I don't want to call them like in camps, but there are like Benioff and Weiss, like friends, people like Jason Momoa and Emilia Clarke that are posting from Benioff's birthday party, and like that they are friends. And I think that Dinklage has always had a good relationship with them, and it doesn't surprise me that he's proud of what he did. Probably a little bit easier to be Tyrion and some of that.
Yes,
than it would be to be Emilia if she was being asked these same questions. So there's that conversation too. I think that it's funny, and I think that he's also bringing up a great point. I love the throne moment too. I understand that's all about taste.
Yeah.
But look at Star Wars. It's about peace. Lord of the Rings, named for its villain, not its heroes. It's not about the Lord of the Rings. I think that we put way too much stock into titles sometimes.
Yeah.
Like to this day, I still get to the end of Return of the King, and when Frodo says the Lord of the Rings, I'm like, I mean, that's Sauron. Interesting choice. But so Game of Thrones, I never for a second thought that it was about that, especially when you get into break the wheel talk. Not that it was necessarily successful, but I think it was constantly from the way before that. Let's go to the pilot. The king poops. I'll say poops. The hand wipes.
Yeah.
Like they were always telling you where power was, where power wasn't. Yeah. So I think it tracks on every level.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on all this stuff here, including just Dinklage's delivery and attitude. And I think you can take it from that point of view a little bit of just Dinklage the punk rocker is a great way to look at it. But I also think he speaks some truth as an artist, but also I understand there was some pushback on some of it, not pulling up the direct tweets, but I do agree or understand the pushback because it's called Game of Thrones. That it was in the marketing. I mean, going into one of the seasons, it literally played upon that. That's not Dinklage. That's not even Benioff and Weiss. That's HBO. I'm sure maybe they have a memo comes across the desk. Who knows? But I understand. And that kind of is an easy way to have these discussions. I was hosting the show over at Screen Junkies Plus for a while. Me and Lon would produce that show. And at the end of every episode, we did a odds on who's going to take the throne. It was fun, tongue in cheek, having fun with the concept. But it was kind of an easy talking point. You know what I mean? Am I wrong there?
No, I think that, it's a lot of the times it is easy to package those things. You and I are both wrestling guys, and there's the constant debate. Like, does the title make the man? Does the man make the title? Right. Like, was it the fact that
you're talking about Becky Lynch, right? So
the man, the actual man.
Yeah.
And it's like, it sort of depends on the viewer, what you were invested in, what your favorite storyline was. If your favorite storyline was something like the rise of Robb Stark, then I understand maybe you had a harder time. Or if it was if your favorite character was Dany, that's probably the prime example. But it's easy sometimes to package those things with like, and now they're the champion, and now they have the throne. Hashtag for the throne. Wasn't that, I think that was season 8 or season 7?
Was it.
Hashtag for the throne. So it's like they totally did do that. But then, like any good wrestling feud or just any protagonist, it's about the build. And I think that we haven't trained ourselves for the build at all. That was the thing with Boba Fett, nothing happened in that first episode. It's like, really? Because I think a ton happened. You just didn't get a Grogu moment. You didn't get a shock.
Yeah. And there, I think that episode ended with instead of him getting Grogu to change his life, he got his own life to change his life. I think that's the reveal there. Yeah, and look, and I think you can take these in all the ways. I think you can have fun having those water cooler and bar and party conversations of who do you think is going to be on the throne. I think the show asked that, and I think that's fair. And that's why I agree with some of the pushback against Dinklage's comments, even though he says some of it with a laugh, but his artist's heart is speaking the truth here, because also he's right. If you go back and really dig into the show. I'm someone who's rewatched it in its entirety, 8, 9, 10 times, and then individually watched just a lot of episodes all over, as well as being a book reader and everything. And we're talking about the show, by the way. Who knows what the books will do. But even going to Jorah early on, season 1, like the small folk don't care about your Game of Thrones. They don't care about that. A small man can make a big shout out. That they were saying that along the way in small details, even though it wasn't the headline.
Yeah, there was tons of different perspectives that made the world so rich, all of whom had one thing in common, which was the throne doesn't matter. From highborns like Jamie that saw
Yeah,
the game from the inside and knew that it was the hand that wiped, to people like Baelish that knew what the actual game was, be that through money, be that through marriages and alliances. Varys, of course, for the realm,
yeah,
the Brotherhood Without Banners, Beric, who's my favorite,
yeah.
seeing things on that mystical level of purpose, Melisandre. There's all these perspectives, and none of them are about the throne.
No, none of them really are. And I think even if you break down, and we've talked about it here, but George R. R. Martin being this kind of child of the '60s in a way, growing up during that era, and I wouldn't say he is that he was pro-war, and
Yeah,
much like Joseph and I talk over in Force Center. Joseph's one of his favorite things to analyze is the tension in Star Wars between wars and wars not making one great, and how that's the story about. I think George has got a lot of statements in his story here about what war does to people in the pursuit of power, in the pursuit of the throne. And I always go to Stannis. I think Danny's fair to that. So, anyways, all that to say, I do want to think some of the pushback I think I understood it. I really understood it. Even though he was kind of saying this off the cuff in an interview. I'm not holding him to the flame for this.
of
But
course. Yeah.
if you're out there going, hey, Dinklage, calm down, For the Throne is marketing, I don't necessarily think you're wrong there,
No, not at all. And I think that another point that we've both experienced, being in big fandoms and stuff, is because it must be so peaceful to be like a Quantum Leap diehard, or like a diehard of like
Quantum Leap was a good show.
Metal Gear Solid, just like anything that just like had its day, and we kept going.
Yeah.
But to be in these big ones, I understand that part of the pushback on him might be like people that love him, people that love Tyrion, people that have a good and bad opinions, but then they
Yep.
think, oh God, I was finally at peace, and now an actor is talking. Like, we've all had that moment. You don't even see what they say. Sometimes a friend will text me and they'll say, oh, did you see the Daisy Ridley interview? Like, just to pick a
Yeah.
person. And I'm like, oh, no. Did I?
No.
What happened? Like, you immediately are like, oh, this is going to be a talking point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, and look, and I think we all do, whether you try to avoid it or not, you might align with comments as you need to align for your point of view. And I'm not saying I'm manipulating Dinklage's words to prove my point that I think season 8's great, which I do, and I stand behind loving that season. But it's easy to look at it and go, yeah, he's right, and I have less to fight about here. So I guess I'm just trying to acknowledge anyone out there going, hey, I thought I had some pretty good ideas of what I wanted to happen to Tyrion, Jon, and Daenerys, and I was a little bummed. I think that's still absolutely legit point there.
I was a ride or die. Jamie will become the Queen Slayer. He's gonna ride down there and kill her and be a hero. I'm still reeling from shock about a few things, but I didn't write it, so
didn't write it. Yeah, and again, we always preach about it. Engaging with the story that's presented. That's Scrimshaw led us over in Force Center into that kind of vein of thinking, and I still find that the most rewarding for me. It doesn't have to be for everyone there, but also I don't think he's not wrong about when he's talking about Drogon burning the throne. And again, there was a whole thing that came about the script that in the script notes, the throne didn't mean anything to the dragon and everything. That script to screen is not necessarily the intentions don't translate. It's the choices of the actors, the choices of the directors, and once you actually get to the editing and the CGI, I think what Peter is saying there is true about that scene, and that was to me a big thematic comment in the final season and episode.
Scripts are a technical expression of art, and then you are also making it again, and then you're making it again in the edit, and it's a constant riffing and like throwing pizza dough. Like, scripts are not, I mean, sometimes the differences are so striking, or sometimes they're clearly just there to guide. I believe the Princess Bride script, when Inigo and Wesley duel, it just says best sword fight ever.
Yeah,
and they were like, we'll figure it out, because that's not like, wow, what a lazily written sword fight. Like, it came out the way that it needed to with the art. So I think we put too much, like the Duel of the Fate script got ragged on, and I don't really enjoy it, but there are some things in it where I'm like, that's just script shorthand. Like, leave that alone. Let's talk about this stuff. So
there's some things in there I love, some things I absolutely despise, but that's not the movie that's out there.
It doesn't. It only exists in the ether.
Yeah, necessary rage. Absolutely. Yeah, and I always the example, the easiest big all-time film example to give on that kind of stuff is the Casablanca had no ending, essentially, when they were shooting it. So that turned out okay. Anyways, in summary on some of this Dinklage stuff, I do just love it because it is a little bit of a man just kind of wanting to watch the world burn in a way of like he believes everything he's saying, but he's just like kind of like, hey, here's what it is. Take it or leave it from me. I was there. But hey, it's dragons. Enjoy your dragon shows best you can, and let's all move on. I got Cyrano coming out.
Yeah, and I like that he approaches it still with appreciation for the time, and like, not that any of us are entitled to that. You know, he, like I was when we were saying in text, he could go full Harrison, or at least how Harrison was for a long time, if he wanted to, and that's his right. You know, Stephen Delane, as you've noted, and as behind the scenes material notes, probably not going to show up for the con in Vegas.
Probably not going to the official Game of Thrones con. Stephen Delane.
Probably not going to do a signing. But
if I ever run, go ahead.
If 10 years from now they can convince someone at HBO to follow up on these characters for a movie or something, I think Dinklage will come back.
Yeah,
Kit will come back. So it's like there are these people that like that was something I did. It was fun, and now I'm here.
Yeah, no, you can tell it was life changing for all of them. Yeah, if I ever run into Stephen Delane, like I've run into, I've all the properties out there in the world that I've covered or watched or enjoyed. I have been around and run into more Game of Thrones cast members than any of them, thanks to Comic-Con mostly. Stephen Delane, not at Comic-Con, but if I ever run into him, the last thing I'm ever going to ask him about is Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you're like, so when you played Jefferson,
I'll be like, I enjoyed your take on Jefferson. And he'll be like, "What? Are you wearing a Burning Heart sigil t-shirt?" No, I'm not.
Don't ask me about Salt and Smoke.
No Salt and Smoke. I do want him in a Star Wars, though. I do want Stephen Delane to be some stern chancellor, not Sith. I don't want to be Sith. I want some complicated, comment on power and the pursuit of power.
I think he'd be a great, High Republic's on the brain if he was a guy in like the meetings with the chancellor that is like clearly your great works are dumb, like we need to strengthen, like one of those senators would be great.
The Iron Throne is mine by right. Next story, we are like I said up top, we are all excited for this wonderful show coming out, House of the Dragon. I say wonderful because I'm just going to assume it is. I still sharing these shots from the trailer. Absolutely love them. Absolutely love everything about them. Let me get back. That's a great shot. Love what we see. Yeah, the costumes, everything about them. The details that we got here. But I got to tell you, I like these kind of stories here, and again, take it for what you want, take it for what it's worth here. The one and only George R.R. Martin, he's got some thoughts. He's got some thoughts on this property.
He should have a blog.
Say not a blog. I'm just going to read what he posted on December 29, 2021. Without permission, George, I apologize. He does say, I got to confess, I was chuffed, which is, by the way, one of my favorite words. I say it a lot. When our Chihuahua Baxter gets in a happy mood, I just look at him and go, are you chuffed? Are you a little chuffed Chihuahua? So I appreciate the use of that word. It's up there with hubris. It's one of my favorite words.
Oh, yeah. That's a key word.
Yeah, I have got to confess, I was chuffed to read that the most anticipated news show, according to IMDb, was, drumroll please, House of the Dragon. He does tag to movieweb.com. Let's not do that. There's a hell of a list. That's a hell of a list to be on top of, George writes. Amazon's new Tolkien series, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, Marvel shows, Star Wars shows, good company. I'm anticipating House of the Dragon pretty eagerly myself for what it's worth. Okay, I'm hardly objective, he says. I know a lot of what you'll be seeing. I wrote the book. Also, mum's the word now. Don't tell anyone. I've seen a rough cut of the first episode, and I loved it. It's dark. It's powerful. It's visceral, just the way I like my epic fantasy. Ryan and Miguel have done an amazing job in the cast. Just as with Game of Thrones, most viewers will only have heard of few of the actors, but I think you are going to fall in love with a lot of them. Only to have your heart broken later. But no, that would be telling. I think the Targaryens are in very good hands. Anticipate away. I do not think you will be disappointed. Wonderful words, but also, Alden, dangerous words to get us hyped up, I think. There. What do you think about George hearing these stuff?
Dangerous, juicy. I love. Again, I don't know what it is about me. If it's the characters I like, if it's the growing up like doing like theater or whatever. But I love someone that hypes themselves to a healthy degree. Someone that like is a good promo, as you'd say. Like George drinks his own Kool-Aid in a healthy way, louder than the other George Lucas, but in a way that is like playful. Like for him to say like, oh yeah, I was number one. There was also Tolkien and Gaiman and all these people, but I was like some of them dead, some of them living. And for him to just like claim a little victory way in advance is very funny. But also then there's but what is he really saying? Like getting to the like, does he like? I'm waiting for the tweet that's like, he said he liked this, therefore he did not like seasons 5 through 8.
Right.
But him saying that this is the kind of fantasy he likes tracks because Fire and Blood is sort of the when people out there in the culture say I love Game of Thrones because I love the scheming. I mean that's there a lot of scheming, a lot of intrigue and stuff. So it's very exciting. I don't know if he's back on screenplays for this show, if he's going to be hands on again, but I'm excited that he's excited because also a lot of creators don't do that. Like we see George Lucas in footage doing visits, but nobody is able to get the time with him. And even if they did, would he answer? Like, what did you think of Mandalorian season 2, George? He'd probably say, I visited and they were doing good work. Like,
I'm gonna go to Sabaro.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you on this, and including George's playfulness with his own identity. He knows who he is. He's aware who he is, but he also, I think, is aware that it doesn't mean anything in the long run of life. I think he's a great cross between very sure of himself and very very aware of the big picture, like I said. So, but I do enjoy him saying this. It does get me excited. He is respectful for the most part, unless his agent is speaking to a person writing a book. He's respectful to the most part to Dan and Dave. I really believe that. I really think at the end of the day, he enjoyed what they did a lot. It's just I think he can't help, but I don't know him. I just think he can't help but be swayed by some of the public opinions. And if I was writing a book and you made a movie of it and people didn't like your version, I'd be like, hey, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I would hope I would do it in a better, the most respectful way possible. Again, not saying George did anything.
And this is not an isolated phenomenon. I mean, look at Stephen King with like half of the Stephen King movies. It feels like every other one he likes and every other one he won't touch. So.
Yeah, and look, Lucas is he's been a little scornful at times, only because they think the transition to the next phase of his life was both what he wanted, but also is completely entirely. It's just a difficult thing to give that up. So George isn't giving it up; he's involved, and I don't think. Learning to speak George, which includes lots of descriptions of eel pie. I read between the lines. I think he's just he's really content and feels as though they get his version. And I'm, again, not saying that has anything to do with Game of Thrones, because I think they got his version too. But this it's dark, it's powerful, it's visceral, just the way I like my epic fantasy. I want to hone in on that a little bit, Alden, because that's really gives us a hint to what is coming. It is going to be probably what we do want out of this kind of series. We do want to have our hearts broken. We do want to see some beheadings. We do want to have our loyalty questioned to certain characters, and I think that's what he's saying in that.
Yeah, I think that it's important. We're talking about sort of the context of George. It's also important to note with all of this stuff that for George, this is also like more so than I wanted to be a writer, I became one, and a successful one. It's also like a real true nerd dream come true. Like it's well documented. Like you can find like George Martin letters in the back of old Fantastic Four and old Doctor Strange and stuff. So like he's constantly had the desire to be in this world. He's had thoughts on how people told their stories. He
Yeah.
has his very public thoughts on like Tolkien and like certain happy endings and things like that.
Right.
So it's all of this context in the man, so that him saying this about like the darkness and stuff and what we want for our characters, it's really, I feel like it carries almost extra punch because he
Mm.
has such a clear desire that has been built up over so many decades of how he likes this stuff, ins
Yeah.
and outs, all of his unsung contributions, like writing the Beauty and the Beast TV show and things like
Yes. Yeah.
that. So it's like he's a nerd's nerd who loves this in and out. Even
Yeah.
the, bless you, my dog just sneezed.
Yeah.
He's got opinions. um but yeah, he's got just this energy about him of having so much focus, and that's why he's one of the best interviews. I mean, he could be an awkward interview, but like
Yeah.
when you ask him a question, you're
Yeah.
gonna get this really like multifaceted sort of all these angles.
Yep.
So it's exciting to me that even like in saying nothing, he had to emphasize how much he loved,
Yeah.
what was going on.
Say nothing but everything. Yeah. And yeah, I've mentioned before, but if you ever want a fun rabbit hole to go down, just type in George R. Martin interviews on YouTube, and there's an entire. It rivals ASMR. It's just having so many choices.
Yeah,
to
that's
watch George.
just so much, and it's like about the show, about the this,
Yep.
about what portrayals were the way you
Yep.
thought, which ones
Yep.
weren't the way you thought, and like to emphasize what you
Series.
said, the
Mm-hmm.
first show also got it, and it's not like he's saying this is now the one I
Yep.
like, because we can see with our eyes this is in
Yep.
continuity with the original show, it's in canon
Yes.
with the original show, this is a prequel to that show,
Yeah.
but it's also him saying I'm freed up of maybe a
Yeah.
lot of the storylines that, because he's in his 60s or 70s now.
Yeah. Late 60s at the earliest. I think he's in the 70s finally, which is an age number that means a lot different than it did 50 years ago. So
Absolutely,
yeah.
but to say, I think a Game of Thrones what came out in 96,
Yeah.
he probably looks at that guy and is like, that's a different man. So it's like now he can have his sort of what he feels now like this George would
Yeah.
like. Because for him watching Game of Thrones, I can imagine that there was probably oh, I did do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have
Yeah.
now. Like, so some of that.
Absolutely. Look, some of my favorite stuff is him talking about the actors that maybe did different interpretations of his book characters, and him liking them, and admitting that some of it might affect his future writing. And just, how could you write Baelish and not hear Aidan Gillen in the back of your head at this point? All those kind of things.
Absolutely.
One of the big things in talking about the theme and tone, it's like, yeah, this to me is not it's not an indictment on GOT. It is me looking at House of the Dragon thinking, yeah, they're going to continue that spirit. They're going to continue what I loved about Game of Thrones. And you and I talk Star Wars, we talk Game of Thrones. In the Star Wars world, I want Star Wars to be hopeful, full of joy. I want it to be funny, wild, weird. It is a serial adventure. So when I go to Star Wars, I look at things a little bit differently. The comments, the themes, choosing to fight, choosing a side, the value of that, the danger of the pursuit of power. Game of Thrones has a lot of those themes, I think, that are similar, because it's epic fantasy, it's myth, it's those kind of things. But Game of Thrones definitely delivers it in a different package. And I find myself, and I really want to ask you this, I find myself when watching Game of Thrones, I might side with a character and their point of view that is actually in direct opposition to something I love in Star Wars. Case in point, like Bronn. When Bronn fights Ser Vardis in season 1 and defends Tyrion and kills him, and says, and as Liza Aaron screams, "You did not fight with honor," and he's like, "Yeah, he did." I'm like, Bronn's right. That's how you get through the world. Bronn is right. But if that was in Star Wars, I'd be like, Bronn has gone to the dark side.
Yep.
So where do you find yourself in that kind of, to the two towers of themes? We're in between them here.
It's super interesting because I have that too, with whether it's like the very like Machiavellian, like the schemes and everything. Like nothing brings me more satisfaction in the Game of Thrones universe than when a plan comes together. Like example I always go to is Tyrion giving the small council members a different piece of information to see who the leak is. Like it's incredible. And that to me, like I admire the intellect, I admire the deviousness of that. But then if it was happening in Star Wars from somebody like Wat Tambor, or like even as high as like Palpatine with all his schemes, I'm like, well, what an untrustworthy, like suspicious, like in Star Wars, you want people that are
Yeah.
like Avar Chris, that are like Ray, that are so open to other people. And
Yep.
it's all about openness and like trust. And then in Game of Thrones, I'll sit there and I'll be like, idiot, shouldn't have trusted them. Like,
Yeah. No, look, it's the wine sip of justice from Cersei Lannister after killing all those people in the Sept and blowing them up. And she takes that wine sip, and we as a Game of Thrones fandom collectively cheered.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if that moment happens in Star Wars, but and I love it. I don't need them to sync up, and I still think Game of Thrones, especially all the way through season 8, does make comments on some of those choices and
Mm-hmm.
choice for
Absolutely.
vengeance and the choice. I think I look mostly at the Hound storyline, whether that plays out differently in the book or not doesn't matter. The theme remains of him with that moment with him turning to Arya and basically saying, you don't want this. Look what it
Mm-hmm.
turned me into. You have a choice to walk away from that now, and I'm gonna kind of kick you down that path. I think that's a powerful moment in the show to say this a lot of because along the way I was always on the Hound side of like how many Starks they got to behead for you to understand the way of the world. And I don't think he's wrong about some of that stuff, but
Yeah.
there's a cost to it. I think Game of Thrones in the end does comment on that stuff.
And it forced all of us, I know me, it forced me to look at my own desires to see Arya get hers. Like
Yeah, you want it. Yeah,
Arya's gonna take needle and stab Cersei, and I'm gonna cheer, throw up the horns, like yeah.
yeah,
And it made you realize, like, oh, I'm going down that path in the way that Star Wars always tells you not to do. Star Wars doesn't play in the game of lesser evils. You know,
yes,
like it doesn't play in gray, which you and I agree on, which is a huge contentious talking point. But
yep,
balance is the light side. Balance is
yes,
not equal amounts of both. In Game of Thrones, that is way less clear because something
yeah.
like the blowing of the sept, it's like I know that Cersei's terrible, but God, I hate the High Sparrow. So let him go.
Yeah. And how the world and how her own family and how her own father treated Cersei and how,
Mhm.
everywhere in the world they hurt little girls. And, to me, it's Cersei, trying to, assert a little control finally. And, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a weird thing. And, yeah, when she says, "I choose violence," there's not a person I know that isn't like, "Yep, that's great."
I choose
Yep.
violence, and that became a meme. That became something
Yeah.
people just say on the internet. I'm
Yeah.
choosing violence today, and the way that we can worship her, worship a character like Tywin. I give a shout out to my buddy Nikki Kumar,
Mhm.
who co-hosts my Rebels rewatch show with me. There's nary a day that we don't quote Tywin in some capacity. That's his
Yeah.
favorite character. Where even if
Well,
it's just a Tyrion,
yeah.
like just a little admonishing, like you are not on trial for being
Yeah.
a dwarf.
Yeah.
Like unequivocally a terrible, terrible person, father, leader, but
Yeah.
he's just so successful and it makes you that's what grabs you about the show. That's what makes you be able to watch
Yeah.
his death or watch the blowing up of the sept and think in your gut like maybe it'll be different this time.
Yeah.
Like on a
Look,
rewatch.
no, and me and Andres Cabrera, we love Tywin as well. Everyone who listens to the show know. I mean, his line. I mean, you are being counseled at this very moment. It's like
Yeah.
one of the greatest lines ever. But you gotta dig in, and that's maybe going back to the Dinklage thing. Even with talking about Martin and his wanting the dark, visceral, epic fantasies. I think in that he that's the way he talks about those lessons. I agree. I've always that statement of he clearly loves Tolkien, clearly loves Lord of the Rings, but you don't get to hear about Aragorn's tax policies, which might complicate your view on him as a king. So George was like, let's dive in and learn about that. I don't think that going back to Dinklage thing, it's like you and I can and Nikki can and Ace can love Tywin, but if we just stop there and don't dig into what the story of Tywin is telling us and
Mhm.
how he treated his family and that is what brings him down and at least and it's the one thing the dynasty that he wants to protect and he can't even love those who have his last name in his own house. It's valuable lessons, and you just have to make sure you don't stop on the surface. I think it's what Peter's saying and what George is putting in there.
Yeah, I mean it's all over the show. I mean
Yeah,
with Tywin, with every character, there's always a maybe not with like Samuel Tarley. I shouldn't say always, but usually our heroes will go to a heinous place at least
yeah,
once. Our villains, like Tywin can even say, "Yeah, my father was a good man. He loved me.
yeah.
Terrible ruler, though." Like, there's immediately gray injected into all of this, and so it's almost like it satisfies different parts of your brain. I go to
It
Star Wars
yeah,
aspirationally. I go to
yeah,
Star Wars because I wish I belonged there, But really, I know that most of us kind of belong here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to look at it. Star Wars is what I would aspire to be. That's a great way to look at it all. That in Game of Thrones is the dirty, mucky reality that I go into my office when I had the job. I mean, I used to have in my old security director days. I had the throne in my office. It's like,
yeah.
I am the king. I'm not going to tell anyone that because that means I'm not the king. This is a great final question here, and I love this conversation we're having all in here. But this one comes from Oscar Film Forecast. I'd like to see Tywin and Palpatine have a discussion. I think that would be great because I like this idea of hear me out here. Tyrion almost being like a light side version of Palpatine. That's a big, broad, sweeping segment, statement, and it's probably not even fair to Tyrion. But there's some scheming and dreaming going on, and they both enjoy a good, run through a power. They both enjoy the power. They both enjoy the game. But that'd be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. Well, between Tyrion and Palpatine, or Tywin and Palpatine?
He said, "Oh, I read that. Oh, I read that wrong." He said Tywin.
He said
Tywin. I read that wrong.
Way less pleasant.
But I will. But I'm going to stand by the statement. I do want Tyrion's and his hopeful schemes and dreams, and I do want Palpatine to talk. And then when they're done, Tywin can come in and go, "He's so wrong, right? He does some things right, but he's mostly wrong." Then they can have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that Tywin would almost tell Palpatine, "You're doing too much." Like, because Tywin was able to take a diminishing gold mine and a family that really was far from their greatest heights, and still rule. He ruled with image. Like, Tywin is a PR master in a lot of ways. And I think that he would say, "Yeah, you're engineering your war from both sides and spending resources irresponsibly.
There's no gold." Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, Palpatine, I don't know what Palpatine would think of a lot of those people. I mean, Palpatine would probably say, out of my way, and just want to talk to Melisandre. Like,
yeah. What do you know? And maybe take Mel as a threat too. Yeah, I think Palpatine's going to see everyone as a threat, and Tywin does too. I think to a certain degree. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, it's a fascinating. This kind of my dinner with Sheev type of conversational series. Yeah. You and I are accidentally pitching this. I misread that, but now we've got a show we're pitching. My dinner with Sheev, and we just take every kind of key Game of Thrones character and sit them with Palpatine over some crumpets and maybe a tea, an English breakfast, maybe for some characters. Maybe if Braun's there, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Podrick with the wine. Or Lancel.
Lancel. What kind of name is Lancel Lannister?
Then get more.
And Robert Baratheon would be fascinated with Palpatine, because that basically Baratheon going, I hate this. What are you doing? I'm gonna go to some Twilight pleasure house. I don't want it to do with anything.
It'd be Grief Karga and Robert.
Yes.
Go hit up, get a bunch of spice and
Grief and Robert. That's an interesting team. All right, Alden, we've looked into these headlines here, caught up on this stuff. Thank you for joining me last minute here on Casterly Talk, a live version we're recording, but of course I release it as a podcast, still currently housed on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Of course, Good People Association is no longer functioning as a company like it used to be, but this podcast feed still exists. So we'll update you if there's a switch in that here with Casterly Talk. And the rewatch will continue digging into season 4. And I got to get you back in for a rewatch episode, Alden, so we can really just talk like Tyrion with some wine over themes in Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. We can get to the bottom of the honeycomb joke. The ongoing bit throughout the show and all of that good stuff. We'll get some wine live and we'll play the truths and lies game.
I love that. I'd love to play that with Braun and Shay as well, and Tyrion. Thank you, Heath. Thank you, Douglas, for your comments here. And Alden, before we check out, I want to make sure people know where they can find you and all the work you're doing. You love talking Star Wars and you're damn great at it. So where can they find you?
Yes, I do love talking Star Wars, and thank you for those kind words. You can find me over on Octo Radio Star Wars Podcast. That's the podcast feed. It's 3 shows. So you got the one-on-one interview show with me, different people in the Star Wars space. There's the Mandatory and Creed, hosted by Tori Fox, where currently that's where the Boba Fett breakdowns are. So if you want to have some Boba Fett discussions after the episodes, we're going to be doing them there all season, as well as any other Boba tidbits we can get our hands on. Who knows? Maybe, I'm not saying Tamora Morrison will pop up, but something. And then also a rewatch Between Worlds, where we've been going back through all of Rebels in the most in-depth way we can. Commentaries, watching all the recons as if it was 2014.
Love it.
Getting crew members on, hopefully some actors. So that's a big passion project. And then One and Done Film Club's another podcast I do, and then you can find me everywhere at that Alden Diaz.
He's back on Twitter. He got kicked off or locked out or something, but
I was it was the sacking of Alden's King's Landing.
Sacking of Alden's Twitter land, but he's back on. Thank you, Alden. We'll do it again. Follow him, listen to all those shows there, and listen to Casterly Talk. Follow me at Ken Napzok, or go to kennapzok.com. Live every Wednesday on Twitch with Ken Goes Live and uploaded later to YouTube. I got Saturday night Napzok bi-weekly. And the music show, Pop Rocket Radio on Mixcloud. If you like rock and or roll with a little pop thrown in, check that out as well. All right, my friends, we'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.